Okay guys, so welcome back here to the second part of the Paymo Stroker vid. If you watched the last video, you'll know that we left off at this point where we're just about to remove the coil packs from the head, and we're aiming to get down to the bare block by the end of today. So we are really gunning for it here. I'm starting to remove all the bolts from the coil packs, and then I'm going to unplug those coil packs and really get into the start of the top of removing the cylinder head. So we've done that now, we've got the packs out of the way. And we want to just quickly buzz along all the little bolts that take the wiring connectors, the ground wire, and then begin to remove all the rocker cover bolts. Now, whilst we're here, I just want to mention, if you've not seen my channel before, you may not know this, but this engine is a 140,000 mile engine that was owned by an older man before me. It's an automatic. It hadn't been ragged as far as I know. I've given it a little bit of stick since I've owned it, but what I really wanted to get in here and look at is the condition of the cams and the inside of the head. I'm hoping to see very little oil varnish so that we, I get a bit of satisfaction out of knowing that my 5,000 mile oil changes really do keep an engine clean. So as I take off the rocker cover here, I really want to just see the condition of the cams, the colour of them, whether they're worn in any way, and whether there's any damage to them. That gives me a lot of an idea of how healthy this engine was before I split it apart, knowing that I'm going to be rebuilding it. And one little thing I just want to mention, this part here that you can see where the half moon seal is the part which a lot of these rocker covers will leak on. This rocker cover gasket was done not too long after I bought the car, because it's one of these things that just goes on these vehicles. They go dry and plasticky and don't work anymore. That's where you put a little bit of sealant just to stop that happening. So here we go, let's open her up and have a little look underneath and see what she looks like. Okay, so you want to see what 140,000 mile BMW engine looks like? There you go. Not too bad, not too bad. Spark plug gaskets actually look not too bad as well. Haven't got any severe leakage in there. If you look on the end here, you can see how much oil varnish was on it before I started playing with it. A lot of that has been cleaned up. Let me just pull off the intake cam cover as well. It's looking fairly nice. Almost got to the top dead centre already as well, that's quite tasty. Okay, so let's just pop that gasket off of there. Then we have one cylinder head. Okay, and so from this point forwards we really are getting into the gubbins of the head, so we can see I'm pretty happy with how clean it is. I'm encouraged really. 5,000 mile oil changes definitely do work. We've got to get this Vanos unit off, and there's a few things that I want to do before we get into actually removing the Vanos unit itself. So the first thing I want to check is the cam timing. I want to make sure it's all in time, even though it doesn't really matter because I'm taking the engine apart. I'm learning, guys, so I'm trying to learn how to do this thing properly. This is, what you see here is a timing chain timing tool that I made myself, just out of a piece of iron bar, and that slots down over the back end of the camshafts. So you'll have seen these things before, they sell them on eBay. I'm removing a stud here at the back end of the head next to the exhaust cam. Without doing that, you can't slot the tool down properly to make sure the exhaust cam is in time. The M54B30 intake cam uses the same timing marks as the M52, so the timing tool here, this bar, is useful for that, but for me, with the M50B25 exhaust cam, the intake as exhaust, it becomes useless because that one's going to be all kind of wrong. It's going to be clocked to 62 degrees and I have to use a dial indicator to make sure that's at the right point in its time. But yeah, I'm pretty happy, it goes in place, and from here on out it's really me being a bit concerned with, are the valves going to hit the pistons as I try and move the Vanos away from the front of the head? You have to turn the intake cam to do that. So I'm putting the crank pulley back on here, and what I'm doing is I'm just rotating the whole rotating assembly about 20 degrees clockwise to drop the pistons down away from top dead centre. And then if you look at the exhaust cams at the moment, the intake and exhaust are both pointing towards one another. This is top dead centre, and you can see if you look down the head here, there is actually all the different valves are either just engaging or disengaging from the lifters. What we want to try and achieve is a minimal amount of contact so that there's only one cam cap on each cam that's really got any kind of tension on it. This is a kind of crucial step if you're going to be taking the camshafts out of a running engine without taking the head off, because as you remove those cam caps, you want to remove the one that's under tension, or the two that are under tension at the last point. That avoids you snapping those lovely hard camshafts and causing yourself a world of pain. So what you would do is you'd loosen up all the loose ones and then work the two tight ones up and out as you work down the head. So I'm fairly happy. I'm just moving the crank pulley now and that gets me to a point where there's none of the valves really fully decompressed or fully compressed. And then once I've done that, I can start loosening off the top timing chain tensioner and removing the Vanos. So here come the Vanos nuts at the front of the Vanos unit. We've got to undo all of them, and then we have to take off the 2 inspection plugs so we can get into the exhaust cam and loosen off the nuts that hold the exhaust cam sprocket onto the cam itself. So that's what you see me doing here, those 2 plugs. And then we'll just get in and crack the, I think they're E10 Torx bits that are on the end of the exhaust cam sprocket here. We're going to undo those, and that allows us to move the intake cam without moving the exhaust cam, so they move independently of one another. I'm just lining up the exhaust cam again just to get access through the portholes there to get the bottom 2 nuts. So we've got the tension here on the tensioner. I want to just compress that tensioner down and put a pin through the little hole in the back of the tensioner, which then holds the sort of piston part down. I'm going to use the one that came with my new tensioner, and I'm just going to pop that in, but you can use any hard pin that's strong enough to hold it down. It's quite a lot of tension actually, so you need something like a hard Allen key, a really small one, that can go through the back of the tensioner unit and can actually hold that piston down. You'd be surprised how much force there's actually on this chain. So anyway, just push that down, pop the pin in, and then the chain is essentially loose. Not loose enough it can slip at the moment because it's not under any kind of real force, but now as I move this intake cam, the exhaust cam moves independently, and we're looking good to remove the Vanos at this point. So we just have one final check to make sure everything is out the way and there's no valves going to hit any pistons, and then we can start playing by moving the intake cam anti-clockwise, and you should see the Vanos unit just pop away from the head. There we go, and it's basically loose. So there it is, it comes off. The helical gear gives up, and this is the Vanos unit that I kind of rebuilt on the car. Now, I was pretty happy with it. The seals I bought on eBay weren't too bad. I did have a little bit of a grumble from it after I'd fitted it, but it did seem to bed in eventually and it worked okay. It spins very freely, and there is a bit of a rattle to it, which is why I've gone and I've spent all that time and money rebuilding the other unit that came from my 323. This one here can be rebuilt now, and I'm pretty sure I've got a couple of mates in the world out there who can actually take on this soon-to-be rebuilt Vanos unit, and they'll be able to use it in their M50 or M52 cars. Right then, cats and dogs, boys and girls, we're now at timing chain point. So what we have to do here is remove, as far as I know, all these little nuts in the front of the connecting chain that are now loose, and not drop them. I'm actually going to be reusing all of this, so I don't want to do any damage to this part. Right, so in here we've got a little spacer plate to begin with. There he is. And as you can see at the dead point, or when it's set to top dead centre roughly, you've got the bolt holes at the right hand side of these little cutouts. And behind this guy is a sort of big sprung washer, so this will stay tightish as I remove it. And the sprung washer, as you can see, sits with the cup facing outwards. Okay, so then we have hopefully a loose top timing chain here, so I should be able to pull him away. And although I'm not keeping the chain, good little tip if you want to keep the orientation of these is just to put a cable tie around the middle of them. There we go. So we can't go anywhere now. And then we have 2 independent camshafts. So at this point I want to remove this top tensioner here. Okay, so we have the top tensioner and its bolts. I'm going to keep him as he is so that I can remember the orientation of those bolts. So just for reference, this is an E8 Torx bit, and I'm using a 1/4 inch ratchet. This is the upper timing chain guide here. There's one in the back there that's really nestled in between all the cam gearing. Okay, so he's now loose. I now want to remove the rest of the sprockets and gearing from here. So we have the plate, and this is the reluctor ring here for the cam sensor. You can see the cam sensor sitting just behind him there. We then have one completely loose cam, and the tensioner, which is loose. I don't need to remove him. He will come out with the cams if I want to, and he'll come out from the head, no problem at all. Those bolts fit like that actually. Second thought's a beautiful thing. Then I can lift that tensioner up and out of the way. Right, so the only point we've got to do now is release the tension on the main chain. So 32mm relatively deep socket you need to remove the tensioner. There is the tensioner. I have a new one. This tensioner here will be going in Natalie's M3, but the ones in the M3 are slightly different. I might do a bit more detail about this, but long story short, the M3 one has a different nose piece and a different spring. I'm going to take the back half of this one, put her nose piece in with my new spring, and she'll have then the equivalent tensioner to an Evo tensioner that is far better at doing the job that it's supposed to do, doesn't leak oil the same way. We now then have a nice slack timing chain. I should be able to ease the sprocket away from the cam, drop the sprocket out of the cam. At this point, if you've watched any internet videos, you want to keep this chain off to the side of the engine somehow. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you don't want to let it go. If you're not rebuilding the engine, this chain will drop straight down into the bottom of the timing case and you'll lose him. So you want to try and keep him tight to some degree in the hope that he doesn't do that. Obviously it doesn't matter so much to me. I can let him disappear down into the depths because I'm going to be pulling him off in a second anyway. Also, I want to just take a little eyeball on this cam sprocket and see if there's any ID marks. I've been told there is, to show that it's at top dead centre when it's not in the car, when it's in the car, sorry. But I don't see anything there. Right, what's quite interesting is when it's parallel with the head, this is not quite straight as well. So, okay, at the end of the day, I'm putting a completely different exhaust cam in and I'm going to be clocking it. So, it's kind of irrelevant to me, all this stuff. But it would be nice to see if there's any IDing marks on there. The only other thing I want to do right now is just pull off that cam sensor, which again I've got a 10mm bolt in because I hate cap head screws. Okay, so one little bolt for one little cam sensor. I'll use my thumb inside, pull him out of there. He's a good sensor as well, so we'll hang on to him. So we now have a head which is only held down by the head bolts. Now you can remove the head by taking all the camshafts out. I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to remove the head by going straight into the gaps that you can see here, and I'm going to remove all the Torx head bolts. So you want to work from the inside out when you do anything like this. I have got a note of the actual order, but as I'm not keeping this head, I'm not too worried about how I'm going to be doing this. Obviously when I put it back together, it's crucial that I tighten and loosen them in exactly the correct order. There are 14 cylinder head bolts. Yes, they are E12. This is ever so slightly too wide. I'm just gonna... It's very interesting that, because I did the 323 head without removing the cams. Yeah, we're good to go. Okay, sorry about that. So if you've got a very thin wall socket, you can get in there with an E12 Torx bit and you can remove the head without having to fang around with taking the cams off. But you're going to need a little bit of help because those head bolts are pretty damn tight. A bit of leverage. Head bolts don't look too bad. They're not rusty or anything like that, obviously. But these are stretch bolts, so they have to go in the bin. Okay, we now have a head that can come off, I believe. So let's give him a couple of taps with a wooden mallet. She's just beginning moving the dowels, so that's our lifting. There we go. So, combustion chambers don't look too bad. Yes, there might have been a bit lean in there. Not too much carbon. They all look fairly regular looking. There's quite a lot of carbon build up on the quench pads. The noise you can hear is just the washers falling out. But the one we're going to put in is a lot better than this. So this gasket, I don't believe I've got a new one of these. Head gasket, Victor Rines, which is quite encouraging because I've bought a Victor Rines gasket thinking that they'd be a good aftermarket one. I'm absolutely convinced this engine's never been apart before, so I think that would be the OEM gasket. I may be wrong, tell me out there if you know any different to that, but I'll need to pull him off to begin with anyway. Right, so I think the next thing I want to do is move around to the front. We'll pull back off the old timing pulley. In fact, we will just do myself a little favour here. So if I rotate the engine like so, and then mark up the pulley so that I know on the pulley where the pistons are not interfering at all with the valves, that would be quite helpful. So if I just dab a bit of red. Right, okay, so the harmonic damper and the pulley. How does the damper look? That looks fairly good. This is actually rubber in here, guys. and that can split and start to cause you problems. Right, so timing case, easy peasy, bunch of 10mm. I have a new radial shaft seal for the front of this. Not that this one was leaking, but if you're taking these things apart, you might as well. Loads and loads of bolts, guys. There's tons of them on this case cover. There's a lot of oil in here, I suppose, so you want to make sure it doesn't piss it out as it's rotating the chain around. Okay, so I'm not too worried about these side gaskets, this one here and this one here. I have new ones of them. Okay, so the timing guides just clip out the front of the block, as far as I know. I've got new guides as well. We'll try and move them the right way, and they break dead easy. And then we can pull off the main chain. He's going to go in the bin as well eventually. It's time to spin him over and pull the sump off. Have a little bit of fun with some pistons. First thing I think I'm going to do is undo the sump plug again and drain out any remaining oil that might be in the sump. Okay, and then we have a proverbial shit ton of bolts down here. Okay, so there's our sump. Now what we've got to go for is oil pump. Nothing in the oil pickup, but it's just a strainer, so that's not too surprising. Oil pump nut, source of all the problems on the M52 engine, if you believe what you read. Righty loosey, lefty tighty, because she's a left-hand thread. We're going to wire the oil pump nut. I've already drilled a hole in the M54 one. It's the same nut. Got some. That's not the right wire there, that's just a piece of wire, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go and have this checked at work to make sure there's no cracks in it, but I've got a little wire hole through there. I'm going to put this one on and I'm going to wire him on, so we shall not have any problems. Some guys we're getting a new one, thank God, so he can go. Cam sprocket, oil pump sprocket. They're all going to get cleaned up. Another oil pump nut, which we'll put back in the safety box. So I'm just going to buzz off a lot of bolts, pull this out, and I'm going to take the block, I'm going to give the block a damn good clean before we start rebuilding it. Fuck's sake. It's the fucking plane, man. Fucking pulling my fucking gloves. I'm pulling the main caps off. It's a bit trickier, I think. I should have taken off the rear main seal cover before I put it on the engine crane. I made a mistake there. One crank. In pretty good health. Pretty dirty piston crown. Quite clean looking rings, but surprisingly most of the rings are quite close together, which is unusual. You'd expect them to be apart from each other. There's a lot of carbon build up on the top of these pistons. The skirts are quite clean. There's still a lot of the coating left on them, unlike my M54 ones. But it's a lot of oil getting into there and burning up and carbonisation. I wonder if that's what I've been doing with the tuning. Okay, and then we end up at the end of the first day here with a really successful teardown. We're down to a bare block, which has got some lovely looking hone marks on one side, very little wear on the other side. It always wears one more than the other because of the rotation of the engine. A little bit of carbon in the top, which will come off with my honing tool, and really looking pretty good for the moving on with this stroker build. So there we go, guys, that's the end of the first day. We're now down to a bare block. I'm getting excited. We can start building this engine now. Bit of a clean up to go, but that's it for now, guys. Stay watching. Thanks for your support. And thanks always for tuning into the Paymo channel. Let's get on with this stroker build, guys. Paymo out.